and Red Hawks scored again. It's 4th and 1 and everyone says the punt. That's not my style, man, that ain't no fun.
Let's talk football, let's talk football, let's talk football.
With Coach Val. Said, hut. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Football with Coach Val. I'm your host, Gil Valtierra, the voice of Calaveras football. I'd like to welcome into the studio my guest, legendary O-line, D-line coach at Calaveras High School, Coach Scott Anderson.
What up, baby? Happy New Year.
Coach, thanks for being here today. Appreciate it. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year,
Absolutely.
all that good stuff. We are back. Congratulations on great season last year. Second round of the playoffs. Had a pretty good outing there.
Yeah, not bad. Didn't end the way we wanted it to. But
Pretty tough. You don't win the last one, right? Then
Yeah, always. There's always one team's happy.
something to build off of.
Right.
So, Coach, our topic today, last year, I had D coordinator Coach Clark in here, and we gave kind of a broad stroke of the entire defense, D-line, linebackers, defensive backs, all that stuff. What we're going to focus on today, and our topic is just the D-line. And, folks, nobody knows the D-line better than Coach Anderson here. So let's talk a little bit about we want to get into like language with the D-line.
Okay.
You know, I know some folks just think, you just got to be, a big old slob of meat and just get down in there and you're fine, right?
Yeah,
but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, not necessarily.
There's a lot more to it. Let's start with what we call the gaps for the layman for those D linemen. So if you're looking at the offensive lineman, you have that center, you have the two guards. There's a gap in between those. Let's talk to the people about what those gaps are.
So the center is the guy snapping the ball, of course, and the both gaps on each side of him, left and right, are called the A gap, right? And on each side of the right guard and left guard is the B gap. Then outside the tackles is the C gap, and then the tight end would be D gap or what have you.
Right, the very outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then when you start talking about A, B, and C gap, when that helps the defensive line, that helps the linebackers understand, hey, your responsibility, don't let anybody in A gap or don't let anybody in B gap. So I can see what there's also a numbering system.
Yep.
That O linemen use when they know where these guys are lined up. Let's go over that a little bit.
So the majority of the time that us up front, the way I teach the guys is it's really not a gap responsibility as an offensive lineman. D lineman, yes, we're looking to slant to a gap and get there and settle and do all that type of stuff. The nose guards in charge of both A gaps, slant strong, slant weak. Basically, what we do is we get a strength call from the Mike linebacker or whoever's in charge of the the strength. And we set our front accordingly, depending on what Coach Clark calls, and then we can line up and hopefully be successful.
Okay, and then so with the numbering system and the you want to go over that a little bit, or
yeah, let's just talk about the strength call, predicated on So basically, what we as the Red Hawk staff and Coach Clark believe in is we're a base 50 football team. We are a gap control defensive front. That means we slant to our gap if we're not lined up in it, and we settle at the heels of the offensive lineman. Right. Once we hear the strength, we can adjust our front to the strength and our slant to the strength or away from the strength or what have you, and slant to those particular gaps. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that helps me get into this next part here. So there'll be times defensive linemen are in a gap. There'll be times they're head up on an offensive lineman. There'll be times maybe they're shaded a little bit on that offensive lineman. Let's talk about what stemming is and what stemming means and what does that do. What's the benefit for the defensive lineman and the defense to do something like that? So let's help the layman out there going, what is Coach talking about? What does that mean?
So what we do is we to stem a defensive lineman is to move him prior to the snap of the football. And the reason why we do that is to confuse the offensive lineman, right? So they see you lined up in a spot, they break the huddle, we line up in a spot, they're making their offensive calls, double, single, triple, whatever you're called on that particular play. And then first sound, we move, and that complete communication system blows up right there on the spot. And those kids have to think on the run, the offensive lineman. And
So for example, you may have a tackle that's head up on the tackle. He's head up on him. The offensive lineman comes out, lines up on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
They're getting ready to snap the ball. He lines up head up, and then as that quarterback starts his cadence, but prior to the snap, he moves.
Yep.
And now suddenly he's in the inside gap, and that changes the whole blocking.
Exactly.
That changes the whole block.
Yeah.
What if you were trying to run in that gap,
So-
and now he's got to try to root you out of there in a tough angle?
Right. Yeah. So really good teams, they'll have a second play called or an audible call to counteract that. We don't see that a lot. The option teams can do that. Once we stem, they can hold up and they can run it opposite, whatever their call is, Oppo or Xerox or whatever they want to make those calls. But it's tough for an offensive lineman to be able to react to that. Once you do it once or twice, it's tough to get you. Escalon used to get us all the time. We would stem and be successful, and then Escalon would line up and they would go on first sound. So we are lined up wrong and right out of the chute, and then they know exactly where they're running because they know where we're going to stem on first sound. So
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just about to ask. We talked about the advantage. The advantage is confusing the offensive linemen and what their blocking assignments are. Well, I was going to say, now what's the disadvantage of stemming? And it sounds like getting caught. And
exactly. You just kind of get caught moving laterally instead of forward on the snap of the ball, and that's not good for a defensive football team.
Right. So stemming's one strategy, right? So coming out, moving prior to the snap, confusing the offensive linemen, hopefully confuse their blocking assignments.
Yeah.
Then the run play isn't working, or the play action pad, whatever it is, all of a sudden it's not working as good. And then they get to the sideline and the coach goes, where's he lined up at? Well, he's kind of, and then so the communication process between those D linemen and the coach, that's got to be one of the reasons why there's a gap system and a numbering system, right?
Yeah, the numbering system's more for the offensive player,
Right.
and the gap system's basically for the defensive player. The offensive guy, and I'm going to geek out on offensive line play for you right now real quick, but if we line up in a zero technique, that's the nose guard right over the center, right?
Right.
Boom, right, head to head. And if we line up in a two technique, we're in or one technique, we're in the gap. Two technique, we're head up on the guard, and then three
outside of the guard.
And they've got these 3-eye bullshit. That's just too much. Let's just line up in a 3 and call it a 3.
Right.
But,
and then 6, your head up on the tackle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story because I coach defensive line back in the day, and I remember having, I won't mention any names, but I remember having a pretty tall, athletic, fast defensive end, and in passing situations, I'd want to put him in what we would call a wide 9. Right. So instead of head up on the tackle or just outside of eye, outside eye of the outside shoulder of the tackle or the last man on the line of scrimmage.
Right.
He's trying to get the edge. He's trying to get to the quarterback. So in clear passing situations, I tell him to line up in a wide 9, get all the way out there to force that tackle or in man to get a good kick step and have to come out and get you and force him to come play in space where you're a better athlete. You're going to beat him and get to the quarterback and make a play.
Yeah. Who's going to win the battle? Guy going forward or going backwards?
Exactly. Exactly. So sometimes, believe it or not, Coach, I know you've been doing this a long time. Sometimes players don't listen. And so what he would do, is, we're 3rd and 12. It's clear, pass situation. Hey, we'll get wide 9, go get the quarterback. And it must have been something that offensive tackle said that just turned him into a mental midget. He said something to him, and he's like, "What'd you say to me?" And all of a sudden, his wide 9 turned into a 6 head up.
Right.
And he had a pissing match with the tackle. Now, he got the best of him.
Right.
But meanwhile, the quarterback's rolling out and throwing the ball down the field. And I'm going, you're killing me, kid.
Yeah.
We're keep focus here on what we're trying to get accomplished.
Yeah. You want your best athlete out there doing the wide 9 BS.
So,
that's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, he could have did it if he understood the concept of what we actually were trying to do.
Yeah.
But, they're 17 years old.
Know where their head is.
All right, so stemming's one technique for the defensive line, moving around how they're lined up. The next one I want to talk about, Coach, is stunts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
We run stunts a lot of times when we know, we're facing a passing team where a quarterback likes to get the ball down the field. Explain to our listeners what stunts are.
So it's stunts, games, call them what you want, but it's an outside guy inside gap exchange. For lack of a better term. So if one guy's in charge of the B gap, he exchanges gaps with the C gap guy. So basically it's a twist or a cross or what have you. One guy goes first, one guy goes second. This year, we did a really, really good job of Coach Clark put it in this year, and we numbered it this year, and it really helped us out. So starting from left to right, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with backers involved, and then we can go 24, what have you. And it really helped us out. So, and we practiced that for about 6 weeks and finally got to use it. I can't remember. I think it was Big Valley Christian. We used it and just kicked the shit out of them.
Right.
Is my microphone going?
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So we really kicked the shit out of them inside, when they got in third and longs and fourth and longs or third and long, second and long, what have you. They like to throw the ball a little bit. And Monzo really took off he and Taco really went off. I think Taco had 3 or 4 sacks and, Monzo had a couple, and it really worked out well for us.
So, old school, we used to call them TE or ET, tackle and ET.
Yeah.
So a TE stunt is the T's first, the tackle goes first, and describe what that play would look like if it was a TE.
So in our terminology this year, so say
or just like what gaps or who's going first.
Yeah,
and
right. Okay. So if we have a 5-man front, and we line head up on the guards, simple enough, right? A TE would be the tackle would go first, and the end would loop around, and it would be a gap exchange. So the tackle would be the outside contain guy, and the end would be the B gap, C gap player.
So the tackle's lined up inside of the end. So you see, right?
Well, if we're in a 4-man front, so they would be
okay,
yeah.
And so then he's going to penetrate B gap, but then from there, loop around.
Yeah.
The outside guy's going to start up C gap, stop, and loop back underneath, and they're going to do like that little crossing you were talking about.
So we changed it a little bit this year. Excuse me. So what, me, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So so the first man would go underneath, and the second man would go over the top. So if we had a 12 called, it'd be a tackle end, and the one guy, which would be the defensive end, I would have him crash down and take that offensive tackle with him. I grab him by the crotch of his neck and pull him down inside and have our inside tackle just rip that corner. And it was really successful. We hadn't had a holding call called on us all year on that. So
it's tough to call holding on the D lineman.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You rarely see it.
Yeah. And our guys were yanking them down too. It was beautiful to see. Yeah.
So earlier we talked about advantages, disadvantages of the same advantages, disadvantages of stunts.
Well, you get caught, we always say it, if you move out of the gap, 9 times out of 10, that offensive team's going to run the ball right where you disappeared, and if the other guy doesn't get there, it's a big gain.
Right.
We're thinking pass in those situations. A lot of times if we're gonna do anything stunt wise or blitz wise on run, it's gonna be a backer blitz, into a gap. We'd slant and he'd just blitz. But the twist and those type of games, they're not conducive to a running offense.
So it's safe to say that some of these stunts will be called in clear passing type situations,
the more spread teams that we play, we play with those quite a bit. And Coach Clark put him in early. You know, I mean, I kind of chubbed up a little bit when I'm like, Coach Clark, man, what are you doing here? All right. And he's like, oh, we got a bunch of spread teams coming. We might as well be ready. And I'm like, attaboy.
Right.
So, yeah, he surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you got teams that are, you know, throwing it up 30, 40 times a game. You got to have something ready to go.
Big Valley, Rip and Christian, you know. So
Linden.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit, Coach, about what the responsibilities are for defensive linemen as far as like let's start with run. You know, when obviously they're the first line of defense.
Yeah.
What are their responsibilities in stopping the run? So
basically, well, let's just talk about our base 50, right?
Sure.
So alignment in our base 50 is we've got two defensive tackles lined head up on the offensive tackles, and we've got a nose guard lined head up on the center, right? And then our two defensive ends will be outside the offensive tackle and defensive end. And then basically our linebackers. So basically we would get the strength call, you know, from the linebacker himself, and then we would adjust, you know, accordingly, whatever the call is, strong, slant weak, what have you. So if we're in a base 50 and we slant strong, everybody's going to slant to the strong call, strong right, strong left, right? Above and beyond that, you know, we can get pinches. We can get, you know, with the tackles can pinch. You know, we can slant weak. We can do a bunch of different things out of it. But basically, we slant settle into the gap. We only go as deep as the offensive lineman's heels, and our defensive lineman's eyes are always at the mesh point. The mesh point is where the center and the quarterback take the snap. Our eyes are always down inside. Mm-hmm. A lot of kids want to, you know, race up field, and, you know, at our level, coaches see, you know, dipshits running straight up the field. They're going to trap the shit out of them, and
they get penetration. Yeah. I made it through.
Yeah. You know, so yeah, we really work on slanting and settling, and it's worked for us, and we've stuck to that method for 30 years.
Okay, so gap responsibilities, they get into gaps, they control that gap, nobody runs through this gap, and settle, don't get too far up the field.
Yep.
So that's their run responsibilities. Let's talk about their pass responsibilities.
So we always play run first, right? So we are a run team. Our front seven, we're thinking run first. You know, linebackers, everybody. We're slanting to our gaps, getting ready, you know, staying low. We always say low hat, high hat. Right. So if we get a low hat, we're thinking run. Linebackers see those run fits from the offensive lineman. They're gonna sprint to their gap and fill that gap. Right. Same with the D lineman. We're slanting, we're staying low, and if we don't get contact and we get a high hat, which is a pass set, then we just work up the ladder. We call crawling up the ladder, climbing the ladder, and once we climb the ladder, you know, we get to our pass rush fit. Well, you know, we work in our lanes. You know, you have to stay in your lanes. If one guy gets out of his lane, and our linebackers drop in a pass coverage, that could create a running lane for the quarterback. So right. we try to stay as vertical as we can and not get too pushed out of line.
Okay, and then so that's run first, but then when they recognize, oh, we got pass here, then they move on to their next responsibility there, which is rushing the quarterback or somewhere along those lines, as far as, you know, making him uncomfortable and releasing the ball.
Yeah, and we have, you know, you know as well as I do, D linemen have a lot of time to work over there during 7-on-7, right? So we really work hard on our low hat during run fit period, and then we work combination high hat, low hat period, and just work on our you know, run fits and then our pass rushing fits, and we just try to mix it up for them. It takes about 4 weeks to get that drill dialed in, you know, and finally they understand it, you know. Then, you know, then we're moving and shaking.
So I mean, they've got to learn in that system where they line up. They got to learn, you know, the base where they line up. They may possibly have to learn how to stem if they need to change it. They may need to learn how to to get a stun off if it's a passing situation. They've got responsibilities of stop and run. They got responsibility of going after what they do in pass. What are some of the tools that you need defensive linemen to have to execute all of these responsibilities?
So what I do is I use our EDDs, our everyday drills, defensive line everyday drills, same as my offensive line everyday drills, is our pregame warm-up, right? So these guys run these things for 5 to 7 minutes every day, either offensively or defensively. And the tools that we use in terms of sleds and blocking sleds and tackling dummies, and I mean, we use all that good stuff, right? But moving bodies on bodies are the best part,
right?
And most effective part.
And I mean, obviously, sleds and bags, all that stuff. But from like a personal standpoint, from just an individual, talk to us a little bit about what defensive linemen do with their hands, their footwork, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, we try to keep it as consistent as possible, right? So if we're always in a 4-point stance, getting at the line of scrimmage, those front three guys, right? And we're in a base 50 now. We're talking about. So our guys are down and ready to roll. They're on one knee. Once the huddle's broke, they get down on one knee and they're ready to go. Their backs are to the linebackers. They're kind of sizing up the offensive linemen, what they're talking about coming out of the huddle. And then they get their strength call, right? And we slant. If we're slanting left, which we call Louis, we're slanting with our left foot and ripping with our right arm, right? So we're going to get there as fast as we can and violent as we can and try to penetrate that gap, staying as low as you can, the least amount of blocking area as possible. We don't want to stand up and get driven into, the sidelines, but we really try to stay compact and limit the blocking surface. One
of the things that if any of my ex-players, when I coached the D-line for Calaveras, they'll say, what would Coach Val say? And they probably all say like violent hands.
Oh yeah, violent hands.
So tell the folks what that means.
Well, it's a way to physically use your hands to move people's body parts out of the way, whether it be, elbow, shoulder, whatever. You're just trying to get your hands on those guys and get a great violent fit. So you don't want to be a passive football player. Passive football players watch from the sidelines or they end up joining the band, right? So we want guys that are out there that want to, get in a street fight, and we've had guys that have done it and we've had guys that weren't really into it. Right. So, but for the most part, they love it. They're, coming out of there and, they got bruises all over the place. So it's I guess it's working.
Right.
I don't know.
So all right, upper body, we got violent hands. Yeah. I mean, offensive linemen, better than most. They're being taught to get their hands on defensive linemen and move them where they don't want to be moved, right?
Yeah.
So those guys are combating that with using violent hands. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about like footwork during that process.
So a lot of times if you're talking about an O-line guy, striking you and getting you caught in the breastplate, right, and they're holding on, we're trying to hammer, right? As you and I used to call it sword hammer, right? We do the sword hammer on them, we just try to get that guy's grip off of you somehow, some way,
hard to make a play or make a tackle if there's a guy on you.
Right. Exactly. So we're just trying to wipe the hands away, hammer them away, whatever, push them up, to the sky. There are all kinds of drills that we do, ice pick, that's one of our spin moves,
And then, even like old school stuff. There's like, swim coming over the top, ripping underneath,
LSU,
spin moving,
club rips. Yeah.
So there's all these different, strategies of getting off a block and getting where you're supposed to be.
Ultimately, it starts there, but you've got to keep your feet moving and you have to have leverage and ultimately you have to want to get off of that block. Right.
Right.
So that's number one is you have to have the want. You can't just stand there and get blocked and just be happy with it. You got to be pissed off.
Right.
So
I one of the and I've seen it happen a couple times. It's rare, but an absolute dream for a defensive lineman the scoop and score.
Oh yeah.
Tell our folks about that.
So we run a scoop and score drill, twice a week, all year long. It's one of those things, 7-on-7, takes forever, and our guys are over there, we get a couple of water breaks and we do a scoop and score drill. I over in Amador, and I hate to talk about Amador football, but they'd never done it over there before. Right. And I introduced that over there, and Inigo Baxter, one of the linemen over there that I had, he actually had 2 scoops and scores in one season, and I was like, wow,
that's impressive.
Yeah, I was pretty happy about
that. Pretty rare.
Yeah, yeah. So we've had some guys, a lot of the kids I teach them, if it's not bounced up into your, up around your belt buckle, just cover it up, and we've had some guys, cover up a couple of fumbles this year. So it was pretty nice.
Right. Nothing that changes the momentum of a game quicker than getting a turnover.
Right. Yeah. But, usually it's a two-way player, the guy will get that fumble and he's all stoked and he's jumping around. Then all of a sudden he's got to switch his defensive brain into his offensive brain, and it takes a few plays to get him back right.
Right. Stop celebrating, get in the huddle.
Yeah. It's like a dog chasing a cat, you get them back and they're like, oh shit, where was I?
That's funny. Coach, what would you consider the ideal body type for a defensive lineman? And does that change depending on if you're an interior guy or an exterior defensive end type? Talk to us a little bit about body types and agility types between those two and what you're looking for ideally in those spots.
Man, in a perfect world, we could have all 6'2", 250-pound guys like Central Catholic has, and they live in the weight room. But unfortunately, we don't get that. In the past we've had some big dudes. We had Troy Baker back in the day, and he was just a beast in there, and he was kind of the guy that's. I always like, man, if we could get a couple of more of those guys, but
we had him on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, we had him 1 year and he was just a beast. Right. But it really doesn't matter to me. I always joke around. I said, if you fail at DB, come on down. We might get you in a game down here. I don't know.
You say that with kind of like, yeah, you kind of giggle and you laugh, but there was a year.
Oh, yeah.
There was a year. I think I called it the NASCAR package, where like instead of like all these big lumbering linemen up front, we would grab all these DB types in there, put them in, and obviously we did it on passing situations. They'd fly through the gap. The old linemen aren't expecting. They're like, whoa, this guy's way too fast for me to try to get in front of. And so all of a sudden it created, pass pressure.
Right.
And so I know it's kind of a loaded question. What's the ideal body type for a D lineman? And to me, it's like, well, it depends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, am I facing a team that's going to run the ball 50 times through A and B gap, and that's it?
You got to have dudes. You're right. But yeah, if it's a a mixed team, pass run, and you can get a good idea of what they're doing, you can sneak a small guy in there. The worst thing you can do to an offensive lineman is change the leverage angle, right? You're used to blocking a 6 foot, 195-pound guy, and then all of a sudden you bring in a 5'9", 140 guy, and he's quicker than shit. That guy's going to make some plays, if he's willing to, right? However, if they decide to run, then that guy's he's caught in a wash,
Right.
So, but yeah, we have a thing that we kind of thing that we call revolver. On teams that kind of we've played for years and years, they get used to our defense and they know what we're going to do. And then what I will do is I will rotate guys either clockwise or counterclockwise to give those offensive linemen fits. They're not blocking the same guy all the time,
right?
And it gives me a chance to keep my offensive linemen a little more healthy and less winded during the game, give them a little more rest, so it gets some kids some playing time that, are on the fringe of starting, playing. So it's worked out for us.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good idea as far as just getting guys reps.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, if you feel like you won a battle on a particular play, and then all of a sudden you're like, I know what this guy's doing. You can own him the rest of the game.
Exactly.
But if all of a sudden there's a different guy, you're like, uh-oh.
And, you've got to listen to the kids too. When the kid's coming off and they're like, oh, man, he's holding me. He's doing this. He's doing that, And then you focus on him and the kid's standing up or he's just getting his ass kicked, right?
That happens.
Flop your other guy and see how he does,
Right.
And then it's just a different blocking surface for that left tackle. And he's like, oh shit, who's this guy? You got to figure out his scheme, technique. It's you got to throw everything at it sometimes, buddy.
So Coach, one of the biggest misconceptions I always felt was, especially with D-line, is you could be dumber than a bag of hammers and you'll be just fine at the D lineman. But all the stuff we talked about today, gap responsibilities, run responsibilities, fighting off blocks, understanding the play, understanding down and distance, understanding passing type situations, all of those different things. That's just not true, is it?
No. You have to be a smart kid to play football.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to learn and willing to learn on the run, and learn multiple positions. Early on, teams that get you are the teams that are willing to try the things that normal teams try later on in the season. So I like what really gives us fits early on is when a team flops a tight end. Our heads are screwed on backwards.
Strong right. Wait a minute.
But so every day we use our EDDs. We run our offense strong right, strong left, and keep our guys in the same positions, and we'll move them around. And we work once week 4 or 5 gets around. Shoot, these guys got it dialed. Hopefully.
Right.
Yeah.
So, don't necessarily need to be the biggest guy. No. Having some agility is good as far as being able to move around. As far as athletic ability goes, got to be strong. I mean, you can't just get pushed around because there's big O linemen trying to push you around.
Yeah, you got to have some dog in you. Some of our best D linemen, I almost said O linemen, have been wrestlers. I mean, 100
good leverage,
155 pound, 5'7", just tough guys. I mean, I have 3 that I can think of now, but I can't remember the damn names, so.
So, Coach, we talked about the A gap, the B gap, the C gap, numbering techniques, so, for the O lineman, that kind of stuff. We talked about stemming to try to confuse the offensive linemen. Talked about stunts to try to get some pressure on the quarterback in passing situations. We talked about the different tools that those linemen will use, violent hands, footwork, all that good stuff to take care of their responsibilities, upper body, movement, footwork, all that stuff.
Weight room.
One word? Is that one word or 2 words? Is it a compound word?
Yeah, depends on how fast you say it.
So is there anybody, in the recent past, maybe someone from this year and this past season that kind of encompassed all of those attributes and did a really good job? Or maybe even somebody that, started off like, deer in the headlights, you don't even know what he's doing, but he got in there enough and then all of a sudden one day that light went on and he just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I've got a couple of stories about this year. It goes back to, last season as well and 2 years prior. So this kid, both these guys are seniors this year. Brian Clausen, he showed up as a freshman, had a ton of COVID weight. He was just, growing into his body, and he was like a baby giraffe, man, or I don't know what he was. He was just a big, just a fat kid, right?
I like the baby giraffe thing because I can just picture the stumbling around, right?
He wanted to be there, and we just kept saying, man, if he makes it, I mean, he was 6'2" as a freshman, probably 250 pounds, but he had a lot of COVID weight on him,
right?
And you could tell he could.
Me too.
Yeah, he got skill, me too. But anyway, he battled through his freshman year, and then he came back his sophomore year, and he got a little stronger. He was in the weight room all summer long, and then junior year he shows up and he's back again, and I'm like, all right, well, this is a good, nice surprise. He's got his third year in, worked out through the season. He didn't get a lot of playing time all the way through his career up to that point. This year, early in the season, I said, "Hey, Brian, if you want to see the field, you're going to have to get better, right?" And he's the class clown, keeps everybody light. I love him to death. And I think it was week 3 or 4, 2 or 3, 3 or 4. I don't know. We're beating somebody pretty good. He got in the game, and he made a tackle, and Guy Dossey put it in the paper. Yeah,
Nice.
Oh yeah. And that was he was like my baby at that. I'm like, oh, that's like my own son. I watched him just grow into this, he wasn't an All-American, but he made a play, and he got up and he made, he was just, and the team was fucking stoked, man, for lack of a better word. They were just pumped for Brian. Right. And, so I made his enterprise picture my screen cover for my phone, right? And I'm like, and I go, Brian, check that number out. And he's like, oh shit, coach, that's me. I was like, oh yeah, buddy. I was pretty stoked about it. And shoot, I think it's against Summer. I don't know who we were playing, but he got a fumble recovery, late in the game, and it was a pretty tight game. We put him in, and he made play, and eventually Coach Mosa picked him as a captain. He went out. I can't remember what game it was, and I was just pumped for the kid, man. He never quit, and that's all you're looking for out of high school football kids. You see a kid come in, and you're 100% certain he wasn't gonna make it, and he proved us all wrong, and that's just a tribute to his intestinal fortitude, for lack of a better term.
And then to think what he's going to do in life now that he realizes, hey, wait a minute, if I don't give up and if I do work hard at something, maybe I can do something.
Right.
Just that whole different frame of mind based on having a little bit of success.
Right. And, he's a great kid. They call him B-Riz, B Rizzy. So, he's got a great personality, and he's going to do good things. I really hope so. We got another kid, Zeke Bent. He started last year. He was in the weight room, he could lift the shit out of the weights, and he'd never played, and he just didn't know what to do with his hands, and we put him at D-line, O-line, and he's, he come that late. Offense is tough to pick up, and by the end of this season, he was taking 75% of the reps at the end of the season here,
Wow.
And, he was actually contributing to our football, our defense. And it was nice because we can get some of those two-way guys out, and I didn't have to worry about Zeke, and same with Gio Martinez, same thing, kind of a heavy kid, and he battled, never quit. Sprints were killing him, and he always came back, always bounced back, and proud of those guys for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's to me, if you guys out there listening, if there's any message to be taken here and you're listening to Coach Anderson, unsecure, not sure about your responsibilities, don't know a lot about the game, get in the weight room, get strong, and work your tail off, and the coaches will help you get there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the friends you make along the way are forever. You and I talk about it all the time. If, I don't know how many band people talk about their days in the band in high school.
Right.
But I know for a fact that these guys will be ripping each other for the rest of their lives, talking about the good times and the bad.
A funny story about that, I would always, I run into people that I went to high school with that, you don't know exactly who they are, but you went to school together, and you go, you kind of give them that nod, hey, how's it going? And you keep walking. But, that's just like you pass each other in the hall. Right. I went to school with them. Yeah. But when you played football with someone, that means something totally different because you guys went through a lot together. Yeah. You went through hard summers of sweating together. You went through the weight room together. You went through sprinting together. You went through some tough wins, some tough losses. You went through a lot of emotional trauma with these people. Right. And then when you run into those people, it's like a long lost brother that you haven't seen in 30 years, and you want to go hug them.
Yep. And, you never know who you're going to be down the road. And you never know who your teammate's going to be down the road. He might be a dude you're, sitting on an interview for a job.
There you go.
You just never know. And it's always good to have those guys in your back pocket.
I ran into one. His name's Donnie Burke. We played at Newark Memorial together. Big stud, hell of a football player. I was an average player. And he was coaching high school football as I was, and we were at a coaching clinic. And he goes, Valtierra, and we gave each other a big old hug. It was like I said, we've been through all those things together.
Were you here at Calaveras when that happened?
Yeah.
I think you introduced me to him.
Yeah. So we run into each other, and it's just like one of those long lost brothers you see. Then he goes, "You're coaching?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You weren't that great a player, man."
Oh, no.
And I'm like, "Yeah, that makes me a better coach, though."
Yeah. That's horrible.
He's like, "You're an idiot."
Yeah, but you got a double chin now there, bud. So whatever. You're in your third divorce. So get out of here.
Go back home in your Prius.
Yeah.
But
your kid's in the band. Sorry, band people.
But you're right. I mean, you run into those people. You've spent time together.
Yeah.
It's just one of those special things.
Right.
So.
Right. Have a few beers and talk about the good old days. Maybe embellish a little bit, but
Football stories are like old fish stories.
Yep. Just get better as they go, man. Just get better.
Well, Coach, we're getting towards the tail end of our time here. Anything before we part ways as far as D-line goes and talking about all that good stuff and any other messages around the D-linemen and stories?
I'm just so happy to be a part of a lot of these kids, lives, I know a bunch of them down the road, when I'm long gone, they're going to have some Anderson stories, and that's what it's all about, man, is getting connections and friendships down the road and memories, It's what it's all about, man.
Yeah, you bet. That camaraderie, that closeness, that connection with another human being, man.
Yeah. Plus, when you have them, they're cheap labor too. You can hire them.
and they're strong.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, Coach Anderson, I want to thank you for spending the time out of your busy schedule to come down to the studio, talk with our folks today. Going into season 2 here of Let's Talk Football with Coach Val, and we'll be doing 2 episodes every month up until August, and then that's when the high school team gets ready to start going at it again.
I do have a question. When's your album coming out with that intro?
You need to stop.
Say less.
Big shout out to San Lin on the vocals.
That was sweet. I'm telling you.
He's got a couple of kids at the Pop Warner level, so we're going to hear that Lin name.
Lin.
Yep, we're going to hear it pretty soon because they're quite athletes.
I read a lot about them in the paper.
Yep. All right. Well, I want to thank you all out there for listening. Thanks to Coach Scott Anderson for taking the time to come out into the studio and spend time with us. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Let's Talk Football with Coach Val. Be sure to share the page with all of your followers and friends. Remember that we will have 2 new episodes drop every month now until August when the high school football season begins again. And then, of course, we will start going every week during the football season from there on out. Until next time, we are out.
Let's talk football
With Coach Val.
Let's talk football
With Coach Val.
Let's talk football. Let's talk football
With Coach Val.
Let's talk football
With Coach Val.
Let's talk football
With Coach Val.
Let's talk football.
When I strap on that helmet, man, you ain't my friend. Touchdown, Red Hawk scored again. It's 4th and 1, and everyone says the punt. That's not my style, man, that ain't no fun.
Let's talk football. Let's